Welcome to the Explainer. So, when you're walking down a brightly lit grocery aisle looking at all those perfectly stacked, perishable goods, and you just kind of wonder, how does the math on this actually work? Well, today, we're diving into a massive disruption story. We're going to explore a new direct-to-consumer food warehouse model that is completely rewiring our food supply chain. And as you'll see, we'll unpack exactly why the traditional supermarket system, the one we all grew up with, is, well, structurally terminal.
To really understand this financial death spiral, we have to start with one incredibly fragile number, 1.6%. That was the average net profit margin for U.S. grocers back in 2023. Let's put that into perspective. For every single $100 bill a traditional supermarket takes in, they keep less than $2 in actual profit. It's crazy. Enormous fixed overhead costs, we're talking massive commercial real estate leases, huge electric bills to run those open-air freezers, sprawling payrolls, they literally devour almost all the revenue before a single cent of profit is actually made.
Now, when you take that razor-thin margin and pair it with what the industry calls shrink, which averages around 2.5 to 2.7% of gross sales, the math just entirely breaks down. Shrink isn't just shoplifting, it includes the billions of dollars lost to natural spoilage simply because outdated merchandising rules say shelves always have to look fully stocked. But yeah, it also includes the unprecedented theft and organized retail crime waves we're seeing hit places like the UK and Australia. So think about it, when your shrink is literally higher than your profit margin, the public access retail model is mathematically guaranteeing its own obsolescence. It just can't survive. So, how is this new direct-to-consumer model actually fixing this?
Part 1. The dark store arbitrage, leaving the high street behind.
The brilliant first step here is that instead of planting massive stores on super expensive commercial streets, these new operators are retreating to what are known as dark stores. These are secure industrial micro-fulfillment centers. Whether we look at prime industrial rents in London at £28.50 per square foot, Toronto at $16.38, or Leipzig at €21.50 per square meter, the core strategy remains exactly the same. By setting up shop in these global logistics hubs instead of prime consumer retail zones, operators are slashing their fixed real estate costs by an unbelievable 50 to 70%. And here's the best part. Because the public isn't allowed inside, external theft drops instantly to absolute zero.
Once you're inside these secure dark stores, the operational shift is just staggering. Think about legacy grocery for a second. It requires a massive amount of public-facing labor, right? Cashiers, cart attendants, loss prevention teams. That actually wastes about 20 to 30% of the total payroll on tasks that don't directly fulfill orders. Plus, those open-air coolers suffer terrible thermal loss. But in an automated dark store, human labor and open freezers are completely replaced by advanced, vertical robotic cube storage. This keeps the cold air trapped exactly where it belongs, achieving a massive 35 to 50% reduction in refrigeration energy.
Part 2. The B2B liability exchange, reversing inventory acquisition costs.
Okay, let's flip over to the procurement side, because the secret sauce here is wild. They aren't acquiring food as a standard wholesale asset. They're treating it as a toxic liability that suppliers are absolutely desperate to get rid of. Governments all over the world are weaponizing legislation and taxes against commercial food waste. The EU is mandating a 10% reduction in manufacturing waste. The UK is aggressively hiking its landfill tax to over £130 per ton by April 2026. And over in France, they're slapping companies with fines of up to €75,000 just for destroying unsold food. This completely transforms food surplus into a massive financial liability. Suppliers have to aggressively liquidate this inventory or they face crippling fines. So, to totally monopolize this desperate secondary market, the direct-to-consumer model uses an automated surplus auction, and the speed of this is mind-blowing. First, the supplier's software instantly flags any near-expiry lots. Then, an algorithm calculates, in under 200 milliseconds, if the dark store can clear it. Finally, the system wins the bid, instantly issuing automated shipping labels and granting the supplier that sweet liability relief. By operating at the breakneck speed of a high-frequency financial trading floor, they are outbidding legacy competitors by mere fractions of a cent, systematically starving traditional grocers of this discount inventory.
Part 3. Gamifying your groceries, the behavioral economics of the flash sale.
All right, so once that surplus is locked down, it gets fed into a highly engineered consumer app. And suddenly, the experience shifts from, passive grocery shopping into this active dopamine-driven financial trading floor. We really have to ask ourselves, why do you buy so fast? What exactly is triggering this profound neurological compliance the second a modern shopper opens this app?
It all boils down to a meticulously crafted psychological engagement matrix.
First up, you have the treasure hunt effect. When you stumble upon an 80% discount on premium steak, it triggers a massive rush of dopamine right to the brain's reward center. It feels like winning. Next, the platform uses foolproof digital locks in their database, specifically Redis Lewis scripts, to prevent thousands of users from double spending on a single limited item. But the real genius? It's the hard 5-minute checkout timer. This pulsing countdown creates extreme loss aversion. It effectively forces you to bypass your complex cognitive control and just complete the transaction instantly. Throw in a no-limits clearance policy that lets a single person buy hundreds of units at once, and the platform achieves pure, unstoppable logistical velocity.
Part 4. Zero-waste logistics. The perfect logistical execution. This timeline brilliantly maps out the astonishing speed and economic efficiency of the whole operation. Let's say at exactly 8 p.m., the B2B engine wins a bid on some expiring prepared meals. Just 2 minutes later, at 8:02 p.m., a targeted push notification hits your phone. At 8:03 p.m., predictive AI helps you hit the delivery minimum, and boom, checkout is complete. By 8:30 p.m., autonomous robots have packed the order, and the company's proprietary fleet hits the road. By 10 p.m., what was literally a toxic liability for a supplier just 2 hours ago has been entirely converted into localized consumer delivery. It's magic.
Now, let's pause in that 8:03 p.m. step for a second, because it is absolutely vital. To make sure users hit the minimum spend for delivery quickly, the app uses a fill with my usual's AI prediction engine. Look, if you're racing against a 3-minute timer, you do not have time to browse the aisles. So this one-tap AI instantly appends your algorithmic favorites, like your go-to milk or bread, to push you over the minimum spend. By completely removing that cognitive friction, this one single feature drives a massive 4 to 7% net margin uplift. It guarantees per-stop profitability every single time.
Moving on to the last mile, this model strictly rejects those third-party delivery apps. By vertically integrating and owning their own proprietary vehicle fleet, they unlock some massive economic advantages. For starters, they deploy these extreme weather matrices that algorithmically roll back delivery cutoffs during severe weather. So if a blizzard rolls in and it drops to negative 15 degrees Celsius, the system automatically drops the order cutoff to 8:15 p.m., preserving the cold chain integrity of the food. On top of that, because they use deep driver telemetry to strictly monitor driving habits, they can negotiate massive discounts on commercial fleet insurance, which drastically lowers their premiums compared to standard retail delivery.
But wait, what happens to the food that consumers don't buy in time? Well, compare the traditional charity bottleneck with what this model calls the institutional sink. Traditional food banks usually lack cold chain transport and constantly get overwhelmed by unpredictable donation volumes. But in this system, verified food banks actually act as decentralized power buyers. Utilizing master auto buys, they instantly absorb massive pallets of highly perishable food under global Good Samaritan laws. This guarantees same-day movement and, amazingly, absolute zero waste for the warehouse.
Part 5. The Data Monopoly Endgame. The 15-year self-terminating curve.
Okay, here is where the story takes a massive twist. This entire physical food logistics operation, it's actually a Trojan horse. To understand their real endgame, look at the macroeconomic headwinds that are paralyzing global suppliers right now. EU grocery volume growth basically flatlined at 0.2% in 2024. US retail sales growth is projected to slow down to 3.5% by 2026, and the UK is expecting flat or even negative volume growth. Because major agricultural producers and suppliers can no longer rely on sheer volume expansion to drive their earnings, they are getting desperate. They absolutely have to brutally optimize efficiency and stop overproducing. And this 15-year self-terminating curve illustrates the transition perfectly. In year 1, the platform relies 100% on physical surplus volume, giving them a 10% net margin. But as the platform feeds incredibly granular, predictive consumption telemetry back to the suppliers, those suppliers actually stop making excess food. By year 5, physical surplus volume drops to 42%, but thanks to data licensing revenue, the net margin gets pushed to 16%. Fast forward to year 15, and physical food waste is mathematically engineered almost entirely out of existence, dropping below 3%. Yet, because digital data has zero marginal cost, the company's net margin actually doubles to 20%. The realization here is just wild. This business model fundamentally shifts from a physical fulfillment network into a highly lucrative digital data licensing monopoly. They are intentionally engineering their own physical supply out of existence. Why? So they can dictate predictive production metrics across the entire global supply chain. Armed with historical flash sale data and hyper-localized consumption habits, they will literally be pre-bidding on agricultural production weeks before the seeds are even planted in the ground.
Which brings us to this incredibly powerful quote from the source material. The fragile, high-overhead architecture of traditional brick-and-mortar grocery is entirely obsolete. The algorithm has already won. Wow. It's a really provocative realization to end on. If this terminal evolution plays out the way the math suggests, the future of our food supply isn't going to be dictated by farmers, and it certainly won't be dictated by legacy grocery stores. It's going to be dictated by the perfect, mathematical predictability of the algorithm. So the question you really have to ask yourself the next time you step foot inside a traditional grocery store is, how much longer will these shelves actually be here?